Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his destroyer ship watching the stars through the wide window. The year was 2387 and humans had built 12 colonies beyond Earth's solar system. Kepler Station was the biggest and strongest of all human bases floating in space, around a planet rich with metals and rare materials that Earth needed badly. Morrison had served in space for 20 years and had never seen anything like Kepler Station. The huge metal structure spun slowly in orbit with thousands of people living and working inside its many levels. Docking bays held hundreds of ships from tiny cargo haulers to massive battleships. The station's weapons could destroy entire fleets and its shields could stop any known attack. Admiral Lisa Grant called all ship captains to an emergency meeting that morning. Morrison walked through the station's bright corridors past shops and restaurants, where families lived normal lives far from Earth. Children played in the parks under artificial suns while their parents worked in labs and factories. This was humanity's future among the stars. The meeting room fell quiet when Grant entered. She was a tough woman who had fought pirates and rebels for 30 years before becoming the station's commander. Her face looked worried as she activated the main display screen. Long-range sensors picked up something big approaching from deep space, Grant said. We count over 3,000 ships moving toward our system at high speed. They will arrive in 6 hours. Morrison felt his stomach drop. 3,000 ships was more than all human forces combined. Dr. Alex Carter, the station's science officer, studied the sensor data with shaking hands. The ships are using technology we don't understand, Carter reported. They bend space around them to travel faster than light without jump drives. Their energy signatures are unlike anything in our databases. Grant tried to contact the alien fleet using every language and mathematical sequence humans knew. The response came as a beam of pure energy that destroyed the communication array and killed 12 technicians instantly. Battle stations, Grant ordered. All ships prepare for combat. Morrison ran back to his destroyer as alarms screamed throughout the station. His crew of 80 men and women had trained for this moment, but never expected to face an enemy so powerful. Lieutenant Commander Maya Rodriguez, his second officer, was already giving orders to load weapons and raise shields. The alien fleet appeared on the edge of the system, like dark shadows against the stars. Their ships were smooth and curved with no visible engines or weapons ports. They moved in perfect formation as if controlled by a single mind. Those aren't individual ships, Chief Engineer Tony Blake said from his station. They're parts of something bigger. Look at how they move together. The first human ship to engage was the battleship UES Avalon with its crew of 2,000. Morrison watched in horror as the massive vessel fired its main guns at the lead alien ship. The energy beams hit some kind of invisible barrier and scattered harmlessly into space. The alien response was swift and terrible. A beam of white light touched the Avalon and the great ship simply disappeared. No explosion, no debris, just empty space where Earth's mightiest warship had been seconds before. My God, Rodriguez whispered. They vaporized the entire ship. The battle became a massacre. Human weapons could not penetrate the alien shields while their beams cut through human armor like it was paper. Ship after ship vanished under the alien assault. The space around Kepler Station filled with wreckage and bodies. Dr. Carter worked frantically at his console analyzing the alien technology. Their weapons manipulate matter at the quantum level, he shouted over the noise of battle. They're not just destroying our ships, they're unmaking them at the atomic level. Morrison's destroyer joined the desperate fight, but their missiles and lasers had no effect. The aliens moved through the human formation, destroying everything in their path. They showed no interest in taking prisoners or capturing ships intact. Grant's voice came over the communication system one last time. All civilian transports evacuate immediately. Military ships provide cover for the evacuation. This is Admiral Grant's final order. Morrison saw the station's massive guns firing at the alien fleet, but even Kepler's strongest weapons could not break through their defenses. The aliens began targeting the station itself with beams that cut through its thick armor like a knife through cloth. Families ran through the station's corridors carrying whatever they could grab. Parents held crying children as they boarded any ship that could fly. Morrison's destroyer took on 200 refugees, including Dr. Carter and his research data. We have to go now, Rodriguez urged as alien ships surrounded the station. The jump drive is ready. Through the chaos, Morrison saw Admiral Grant standing on the station's command bridge as alien beams tore through the hull around her. She was buying time for the evacuation ships with her life. the brave woman who had protected humanity's frontier, would die with her command. Morrison gave the order to jump just as Kepler Station's power core exploded in a ball of white fire. The destroyer and 40 other ships escaped into hyperspace carrying 50,000 refugees. Behind them, the greatest achievement of human civilization burned in the cold vacuum of space. In the cargo bays, refugees wept for lost friends and family. Many had seen their homes destroyed and loved ones killed in minutes. The children asked when they could go back to their rooms and toys, not understanding that everything they knew was gone forever. Dr. Carter found Morrison on the bridge hours later. The scientist looked old and tired as he reported his findings. The aliens call themselves the Zephyrian Empire according to our translation programs. They have announced their intention to destroy every human in the galaxy. Morrison stared at the stars ahead, knowing that somewhere behind them, the aliens were hunting the scattered human survivors. Earth itself was probably under attack by now. Humanity's golden age of expansion had ended in fire and death. How many ships escaped? Morrison asked. 200 vessels carrying 50,000 people, Carter replied. That's all that's left of the frontier colonies. Morrison realized he was now the highest-ranking officer among the survivors. The responsibility of keeping humanity alive had fallen to him and his small fleet of damaged ships. They were running blind into unknown space, with the most powerful enemy in the galaxy, following close behind them, seeking to finish what they had started at Kepler Station. The refugee fleet drifted through empty space far from any star or planet. 200 ships of different sizes and types tried to stay together, while their crews figured out what to do next. Captain Jake Morrison found himself leading people who had lost everything and faced an enemy that seemed impossible to defeat. Food was running low on most ships because they had left Kepler Station in a hurry. The medical ships were full of wounded people, and Dr. Nina Walsh worked day and night trying to save lives with supplies that would not last much longer. Children cried for their parents who had died in the attack, and parents searched for children they had lost in the chaos. Commander Sarah Johnson brought her science ship close to Morrison's destroyer. Her vessel carried the most advanced labs and computers in the fleet. She wanted to study the alien technology that Dr. Carter had recorded during the battle. "We need to understand how their weapons work," Johnson told Morrison during a meeting of the ship captains. "If we can't find their weakness, we'll all be dead within a week." Colonel Pete Harrison commanded the Marines who were trying to keep order among the refugees. Many people wanted to surrender to the aliens, thinking that might save their lives. Others demanded they fight back even though human weapons had proven useless. "We lost contact with 3 more ships during the night," Harrison reported. "Families are starting to panic, and some captains want to split off on their own." Morrison knew the fleet had to stay together, or everyone would die alone in space. The Zephyrians had advanced sensors that could track human ships across vast distances. Scattered vessels would be easy targets for the alien hunters. Navigator Luke Thompson was a young officer who had studied every star chart in human space. He suggested they head toward the galactic edge where ancient ruins had been discovered on dead worlds. The aliens might not follow them into regions with no valuable resources. "There are stories about old civilizations that lived in those areas billions of years ago," Thompson said. "Maybe we can find something useful in their ruins." Dr. Carter and Commander Johnson worked together studying the sensor data from Kepler Station. They discovered that while the aliens were much more advanced than humans, their technology had some strange patterns. The Zephyrian ships seemed to avoid certain types of electromagnetic radiation. "Look at these readings," Carter pointed to his screen. "Their shields fluctuate when exposed to specific frequencies. It's like they have a built-in weakness they don't know about." The breakthrough gave the fleet new hope, but they still faced immediate problems. 3 Zephyrian scout ships had been following them for days, getting closer each time they stopped to rest. Chief Engineer Tony Blake suggested using asteroid fields to hide their heat signatures. Morrison decided to make a stand in a dense asteroid cluster where the big alien ships would have trouble maneuvering. He split the fleet into 3 groups, with the warships forming a defensive line while the civilian vessels hid among the floating rocks. The Zephyrian scouts arrived expecting an easy hunt but found themselves fighting in close quarters where their superior weapons were less effective. Morrison's destroyer used the asteroids as cover while firing modified missiles that carried electromagnetic pulse. Warheads. Lieutenant Commander Maya Rodriguez had trained as a Special Forces officer before joining the fleet. She developed new tactics using the asteroid field like an urban battlefield with ambush points and escape routes planned in advance. "Hit them fast, then disappear," Rodriguez told the other captains. "Make them chase us through the rocks where we know every hiding spot." The battle lasted 6 hours and cost the humans 8 ships, but they destroyed all 3 Zephyrian scouts. For the first time since Kepler Station, human forces had won a fight against the alien empire. The victory was small, but it proved the enemy could be hurt. Dr. Walsh treated the wounded while families mourned their dead. The cost of fighting was high, but doing nothing would have meant certain death for everyone. Morrison realized they needed more than just survival tactics if humanity was going to have any future. The fleet continued toward the galactic edge, following ancient star charts that showed the locations of dead civilizations. Thompson guided them through regions of space that had been empty for millions of years, where only ruins remained of once great peoples. They found their destination, on a planet that had been cold and lifeless for ages beyond counting. The ruins covered an entire continent with structures that reached toward the sky like frozen monuments to forgotten dreams. Some buildings were still intact despite the passage of countless years. Dr. Carter led the first expedition to the surface, while Morrison kept the fleet in orbit, watching for any signs of pursuit. The ruins held secrets that could change everything, if the humans could unlock them before the Zephyrians arrived. Inside the largest structure, Carter found rooms filled with strange machines that had been waiting in the darkness for someone to discover them. The technology was different from both human and Zephyrian designs, but somehow familiar, as if it had been made by people who thought like humans did. "These builders fought the same enemy we're fighting now," Carter reported over the radio. "The Zephyrians have been conquering and destroying civilizations for millions of years. We're not their first victims." Hidden deep in the ruins was a star map showing the location of something the ancient builders had called their final hope. The coordinates pointed to a region of space where massive weapons and ships had been hidden away, waiting for someone brave enough to use them. Morrison felt excitement and fear as he studied the ancient map. The weapon cache was located in space controlled by the Zephyrian Empire, where no human ship had ever traveled. Getting there would require passing through enemy territory with their small fleet of damaged vessels. But the alternative was slow death, as their supplies ran out and their ships broke down one by one. The ancient ruins had given them something more valuable than weapons or technology. They had given humanity a chance to fight back. "We'll follow this map," Morrison announced to the fleet. "The ancients left us tools to defeat the Zephyrians, but we'll have to risk everything to reach them." As the fleet prepared to leave the dead planet, long-range sensors detected a large Zephyrian battle group approaching their position. The enemy had found them again, and this time they were bringing enough ships to destroy the entire human fleet. Morrison ordered an immediate departure, knowing they were heading into the most dangerous region of space, with aliens behind them and aliens ahead of them. The only path to survival led straight through the heart of the enemy empire, to weapons that might not even exist anymore. The ancient star map led the human fleet deeper into space than any of their people had ever traveled. Captain Jake Morrison watched the sensor displays showing thousands of objects floating in a vast debris field that stretched across an entire star system. What they found there changed everything humanity thought they knew about the galaxy. The Ghost Fleet was the graveyard of a civilization that had fought the Zephyrian Empire millions of years ago. Massive ships bigger than human space stations drifted in the darkness, along with smaller vessels of designs that human engineers had never imagined. Some of the ancient hulks were intact, while others had been broken apart by weapons that could shatter planets. Dr. Ben Parker was an expert on old civilizations who had joined the refugee fleet at Kepler Station. He studied the alien designs through telescopes and sensors, trying to understand what kind of people had built such incredible machines. The ships used materials that should not have been able to exist and power sources that human science could not explain. They called themselves the Architects, according to the symbols on their hulls, Parker reported to Morrison. "These ships are older than our entire solar system, but some of them still have power running through their systems." Commander Sarah Johnson brought her science vessel close to one of the smaller intact ships. Her scanning equipment detected energy signatures that were completely different from both human and Zephyrian technology. The ancient ship was somehow existing partially outside normal space, making it nearly impossible to detect or damage. Lieutenant Amy Foster was a communications officer who had a gift for learning alien languages quickly. She had been working on translating Zephyrian signals since the attack on Kepler Station. Now she found herself trying to decode messages that were older than multicellular life on Earth. "The ship's computer systems are still active," Foster reported with excitement in her voice. "They're trying to communicate with us using mathematical patterns and energy pulses. I think I can establish a link." Morrison decided to risk sending a small team aboard the ancient vessel. Captain Elena Martinez commanded the stealth ship UES Shadow, which could approach the derelict without being detected by Zephyrian patrols. Her crew included specialists in alien technology and ancient languages. The interior of the architect's ship was like walking through a museum of impossible things. Corridors bent in directions that should not have existed, while rooms seemed bigger inside than outside. The walls were covered with symbols that glowed softly when humans approached, as if the ship was trying to welcome its visitors. Master Sergeant Chris Davis was an explosives expert who had volunteered for the boarding mission. He found weapon systems that could fire energy beams through solid matter and defensive screens that could make objects invisible to sensors. The ancient technology was far beyond anything humans had developed. "These people knew how to fight the Zephyrians and win," Davis told Morrison over the radio. "Their ships can phase in and out of normal space, making them almost impossible to hit while still being able to attack their enemies." Dr. Carter joined the boarding team and immediately began studying the ship's central computer core. The ancient AI system had been waiting millions of years for someone to wake it up. When Foster established communication, the AI began sharing the history of the Great War between the architects and the Zephyrian Empire. The Zephyrians were not the original species that humanity had encountered at Kepler Station. They were a collective consciousness that consumed entire civilizations and added their knowledge and technology to its own growing power. The original Zephyrian race had been among the first victims billions of years ago. "The enemy spreads like a plague across the galaxy," the ancient AI explained through Foster's translation equipment. "They absorb every species they encounter, making themselves stronger while destroying everything that makes life worth living. We fought them for 1,000 years before finding a way to defeat their technology." The architects had discovered that the Zephyrian collective consciousness had a weakness. Their technology depended on quantum entanglement across vast distances. By disrupting these connections, the ancient people had been able to cut off parts of the empire from the central mind. Morrison realized that humanity had stumbled onto the greatest treasure in galactic history. The Ghost Fleet contained working examples of phase shift technology that could make human ships nearly invulnerable, while giving them weapons capable of bypassing Zephyrian defenses. Chief Engineer Tony Blake worked day and night with teams from every ship in the fleet to understand and copy the ancient technology. The phase shift generators were incredibly complex, but the principles could be adapted to human engineering. It would take time they did not have, but the alternative was certain death. The retrofitting work was dangerous and exhausting. Several engineers were killed when experimental phase generators exploded during testing. Others were lost when they accidentally phased out of normal space and could not find their way back. But slowly, human ships began to gain capabilities they had never possessed before. The breakthrough came when Blake successfully installed a phase shift system on Morrison's destroyer. The ship could now exist partially outside normal space, making it nearly invisible to sensors while still being able to fire its weapons. The technology required enormous amounts of power, but the results were worth the cost. Martinez tested the new systems during scouting missions around the Ghost Fleet. Her ship could phase through asteroid fields and enemy sensor nets without being detected. The phase shift weapons could bypass shields and armor to strike targets from impossible angles. "We're becoming something new," Martinez reported after a successful test flight. "These ships aren't just human vessels anymore. They're hybrids of our technology and theirs." The peaceful work was interrupted when long-range sensors detected a massive Zephyrian fleet approaching the Ghost Fleet. The enemy had tracked the humans across the galaxy and arrived with enough firepower to destroy entire star systems. Morrison knew they could not run anymore. "All ships prepare for battle," Morrison ordered. "We'll make our stand here among the ancient dead. If we're going to die, then we'll die fighting with weapons that can actually hurt them." The Battle of the Ghost Fleet began with the Zephyrians confident they were facing the same helpless humans they had massacred at Kepler Station. They advanced in perfect formation, expecting another easy victory over primitive technology and desperate tactics. Instead, they found human ships that could disappear from sensors only to reappear inside their formations. Phase shift weapons struck Zephyrian vessels from directions their shields could not protect. For the first time in the war, human forces were destroying more enemy ships than they were losing. Morrison's destroyer phased through a Zephyrian battleship's hull and fired all weapons directly into its power core. The massive alien vessel broke apart in a chain of explosions that lit up the ancient battlefield. Around him, other human ships were using similar tactics to tear apart the enemy formation. The victory came at a terrible price. Half the human fleet was destroyed or damaged beyond repair. Thousands of people died fighting for the right to exist in a galaxy that wanted them extinct. But they had proven that the Zephyrian Empire could be defeated by people brave enough to adapt and learn. As the surviving enemy ships retreated, Morrison knew they had won a battle, but not the war. The Zephyrians would return with new tactics and more ships. However, the Ghost Fleet had given humanity something more valuable than weapons. It had given them hope and the knowledge that they were not alone in their fight against the darkness. News of humanity's victory at the Ghost Fleet spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Captain Jake Morrison found himself dealing with something he had never imagined during the dark days after Kepler Station. 3 different alien species wanted to join the humans in their fight against the Zephyrian Empire. The first contact came from the Resonance, a crystalline people who lived on worlds made of living rock and metal. Their ships looked like flying mountains covered with crystal spires that glowed with inner light. Ambassador Kate Lewis, who had served in Earth's diplomatic corps before the war, worked to establish communication with beings who thought in harmonics and frequencies instead of words. They'd been hiding from the Zephyrians for centuries. Lewis explained to Morrison during a meeting aboard the new flagship. The Resonance can amplify phase shift technology using their crystal matrices. Our ships could become completely invisible to enemy sensors. The second species to make contact was even more unusual. The ethereals were beings of pure energy who existed as flowing clouds of intelligent gas. They had no solid bodies and lived in the spaces between stars, feeding on cosmic radiation. Their technology was based on manipulating energy fields and electromagnetic forces. Dr. Sam Mitchell was a quantum physicist who had been working on improvements to the phase shift systems. He found himself trying to communicate with aliens who existed as mathematical equations made of light and electricity. The ethereals could teach humans to build weapons that drew power directly from space itself. They're offering to share technology that could make our guns as powerful as theirs, Mitchell told Morrison with excitement. We could build ships that never run out of ammunition because they create energy from the vacuum of space. The third alien contact was the most surprising of all. The constructors were mechanical beings who had replaced their original biological bodies with artificial parts millions of years ago. They looked like walking factories with multiple arms and tools built into their metal frames. These aliens specialized in rapid manufacturing and ship construction. General Frank Cooper had arrived from Earth's solar system with the remnants of humanity's home fleet. He brought news that Earth was under siege but still fighting thanks to the natural barriers around the solar system. The constructors offered to help build ships faster than any human factory could manage. They can take our designs and produce 100 ships in the time it takes us to build one, Cooper reported. Their manufacturing systems can work with materials we've never seen before. Ambassador Lewis worked day and night to create the first multi-species alliance in galactic history. Each race brought unique advantages that complemented human adaptability and tactical thinking. The Resonance provided stealth technology. The ethereals contributed unlimited power systems, and the constructors offered rapid ship production. Morrison found himself commanding a fleet that grew larger every day as new ships arrived from constructor factories. The vessels were unlike anything humans had built before, combining the best features of 4 different civilizations into weapons of incredible power. Captain Ryan Murphy was a test pilot who volunteered to fly the first hybrid fighter craft. The small ship used resonant crystals to become completely invisible, while ethereal energy systems gave it weapons that could punch through any armor. Constructor manufacturing techniques made it possible to build thousands of these fighters in a matter of weeks. It's like flying a piece of controlled lightning, Murphy reported after his first test flight. The ship responds to my thoughts before I even touch the controls. When I phase shift, it feels like I'm becoming part of space itself. The Alliance faced its first real test when Zephyrian forces attacked the resonant homeworld. The crystal beings had hidden their planet for centuries using natural stealth fields, but the enemy had finally discovered their location. Morrison led the combined fleet to defend allies who had risked everything to help humanity. The battle above the crystal world was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships phased in and out of reality, while resonant vessels became one with the asteroid fields around their planet. Ethereal energy beings flowed between the enemy, formations disrupting their communications while constructor ships built new weapons during the fighting. Morrison's destroyer appeared inside a Zephyrian battleship and fired phase-shift torpedoes directly into its command center. The massive alien vessel broke apart in a series of explosions that sent shockwaves through the entire enemy formation. Around him, other human ships were using similar tactics to tear apart the invasion force. The Zephyrians had never faced coordinated attacks from multiple species using different types of technology. Their collective consciousness could adapt to human tactics or resonant stealth, but not both at the same time. The Alliance victory was complete with over 2,000 enemy ships destroyed. However, the celebration was short-lived. Intelligence gathered from captured Zephyrian vessels revealed that their success had triggered an unprecedented response from the collective consciousness. The Empire was mobilizing forces from across the entire galaxy for one final assault. Dr. Carter studied the enemy communications with growing alarm. The Zephyrians were not just planning to destroy the Alliance worlds. They intended to consume every planet in the galaxy and transform all matter into extensions of their collective mind. "They're calling it the Great Convergence," Carter reported to the Alliance leaders. "Every ship and weapon in the Empire is being moved to their home base at the galactic core. They plan to spread out from there and absorb everything that exists." Morrison realized that running and hiding would no longer save anyone. The enemy intended to destroy the entire galaxy, rather than risk losing control to independent civilizations. The Alliance had to take the war to the Zephyrian home base, or watch everything they cared about disappear forever. Captain Jose Alvarez commanded the Alliance flagship UAS Unity, a massive vessel built using technology from all four species. The ship was larger than most space stations and carried weapons that could destroy moons. It would serve as the command center for the most desperate mission in galactic history. "We're planning Operation Starfall," Morrison announced to the gathered fleet commanders. "The Zephyrian Empire has its central control system at the galactic core. We're going to destroy it and free every species they've enslaved over the past billion years." Lieutenant Dan Brooks was Morrison's new communications officer, a young man who had joined the fleet after Earth's evacuation. He would coordinate the attacks of 3,000 ships from 4 different civilizations during the most complex battle ever fought. The Alliance fleet prepared for a journey to the center of the galaxy where a construct the size of a small moon waited, defended by millions of Zephyrian vessels. Everyone knew it was a suicide mission, but the alternative was the death of every free mind in the universe. Admiral Marcus Stone arrived with Earth's final contribution to the war effort. The homeworld's entire industrial capacity had been used to build one massive phase-shift bomb, capable of destroying the Zephyrian control center. The weapon required manual detonation from inside the enemy stronghold. "Someone has to stay behind to set off the bomb," Stone explained during the final planning meeting. "Whoever volunteers won't be coming home." Morrison looked at his officers and crew, knowing that many of them would not survive the battle ahead. They had come so far from the desperate refugees fleeing Kepler Station. Now they were leading the greatest alliance in galactic history against an enemy that had conquered countless worlds. The time for preparation was over. 3,000 ships from 4 species began the long journey to the galactic core, where the fate of every living thing in the universe would be decided in fire and darkness. The Alliance fleet arrived at the galactic core to face a sight that would haunt the dreams of every survivor. The core nexus was a structure built around a black hole that twisted space and time into impossible shapes. The massive construct was larger than most moons and bristled with weapons capable of destroying entire star systems. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his destroyer watching millions of Zephyrian ships move in perfect formation around their ultimate stronghold. The enemy had gathered every vessel in their empire for this final battle. There were so many ships that they blocked out the stars and filled space like a metal ocean stretching beyond the horizon. Dr. Rachel Kim had developed humanity's most desperate weapon during the journey to the galactic core. The consciousness virus was a piece of code designed to restore individual identity to every species the Zephyrians had absorbed over billions of years. If it worked, it would tear apart the collective mind that held the Empire together. The virus has to be delivered directly to the Nexus Central Processing Core, Kim explained to Morrison during the final briefing. Once it's uploaded, every absorbed consciousness in the galaxy will start fighting for freedom at the same time. Admiral Marcus Stone had brought Earth's final gift to the Alliance. The massive phase shift bomb contained enough explosive power to destroy the core nexus, but someone had to stay behind to activate the detonation sequence manually. The weapon's control systems had been damaged during the journey and could not be operated. Remotely, Captain Jose Alvarez commanded the flagship UAS Unity as it led 3,000 Alliance vessels toward the most fortified position in galactic history. Ships from 4 species moved in coordinated formations that would have been impossible before humans taught the galaxy how different peoples could work together. The battle began with Captain Ryan Murphy leading squadrons of phase shift fighters against the Nexus outer defenses. The small craft appeared and disappeared like ghosts as they struck targets that should have been impossible to reach. Zephyrian weapons fired at empty space, while human fighters materialized inside their formations. Morrison watched the tactical displays as the Alliance fleet engaged millions of enemy vessels in the largest space battle ever fought. Resonant crystal ships became one with the cosmic dust while ethereal energy beings flowed between enemy formations, disrupting their communications. Constructor vessels built new weapons during the fighting to replace damaged systems. The core nexus itself began firing weapons that could destroy stars. Beams of twisted space-time reached out to crush Alliance ships while gravity wells opened to swallow entire squadrons. The ancient construct was not just a fortress, but a weapon of cosmic destruction that could reshape reality itself. Morrison led a strike team toward the Nexus interior, while Captain Alvarez commanded the main fleet battle. Lieutenant Dan Brooks coordinated communications between thousands of ships as they fought for the survival of every free mind in the galaxy. The team that entered the core nexus found themselves in a realm where normal physics no longer applied. Corridors bent through dimensions that should not have existed, while gravity shifted in different directions every few meters. The interior was like walking through the dreams of a mad god. Inside the construct, Morrison encountered something that changed his understanding of the war they had been fighting. The absorbed consciousnesses of thousands of extinct species were trapped in energy patterns that kept them alive, but enslaved. Entire civilizations existed as prisoners in the collective mind. Dr. Kim successfully uploaded the consciousness virus into the Nexus Central Processing System. The effect was immediate and devastating. Millions of individual minds that had been forced to think as one suddenly remembered who they had been before absorption. The collective consciousness began tearing itself apart from within. Throughout the galaxy, Zephyrian ships stopped moving as their crews rediscovered their original identities. Species that had been enslaved for millions of years broke free from mental chains and turned their weapons against the collective mind that had stolen their lives. The Nexus began to collapse as its control systems failed under the assault of newly freed minds. Morrison realized that the phase shift bomb's detonation mechanism had been damaged beyond repair during the insertion. Someone would have to stay behind and trigger the explosion manually. Chief Engineer Tony Blake volunteered to remain with the bomb while the rest of the team escaped. The brave engineer who had modified human ships to use ancient technology would make the ultimate sacrifice to ensure the Zephyrian Empire could never rise again. Morrison made the hardest decision of his life. As the team leader, he could not ask someone else to die in his place. He ordered Blake and the others to evacuate while he stayed behind to detonate the weapon that would destroy the core nexus and end the war. The collective consciousness made one final desperate attempt to possess Morrison's mind and escape the dying construct. However, his exposure to the consciousness virus had made him immune to mental invasion. The alien intelligence could not break through the barriers that protected his individual identity. As the core nexus collapsed around him, Morrison activated the phase shift bomb and sent a final message to the galaxy. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human fleet. The Zephyrian Empire is ended. Humanity stands with all free peoples of the galaxy. The explosion that destroyed the core nexus sent shockwaves across the entire galaxy. Every remaining Zephyrian ship lost power, as the collective consciousness that had controlled them for billions of years finally died. The tyranny that had consumed countless civilizations was broken forever. Morrison survived the explosion when an emergency phase shift pulled him out of normal space at the last moment. Chief Engineer Blake had modified the bomb to save his captain's life even while sacrificing his own. The brave engineer died as he had lived, protecting the people he cared about most. 5 years after the war ended, Ambassador Kate Lewis addressed the first Galactic Council established. In the ruins of the core nexus, humanity had become the mediating species in galactic affairs. Respected for their adaptability and willingness to sacrifice for others, the former refugee fleet had grown into the Galactic Defense, force that patrolled the outer rim protecting new civilizations from any threats that might emerge from dark space. Admiral Maya Rodriguez commanded the memorial squadron that honored those who had died, turning humanity's greatest defeat into ultimate victory. Dr. Alex Carter's research led to technological advances that benefited every species in the Alliance. The consciousness virus had been refined to help other absorbed peoples reclaim their independence across the galaxy. Billions of minds that had been enslaved for eons were learning to be free again. Children born in space among the stars learned about the day their species refused to surrender when faced with extinction. They carried forward the legacy of those who had transformed humanity from victims into the guardians of galactic freedom. The Ghost Fleet had been restored as a monument to both the ancient architects and humanity's transformation from a single world species into protectors of all life. Visitors from across the galaxy came to see the place where desperate refugees had found the tools to save the universe. Morrison stood in his memorial garden aboard New Kepler Station, watching ships from 100 different species working together to build a better future. The dark days after the first station's destruction seemed like memories from another lifetime. The human species had traveled further than anyone thought possible, from the refugees fleeing burning colonies to the leaders of galactic civilization. They had learned that defeat was only permanent if you accepted it, and that victory belonged to those brave enough to keep fighting when all hope seemed lost.